Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Well done, dude. Yes, it's a nice area to live. I'm simply more relieved than anything else. Our total for the season is, 7381.1. Parker Schnabel's final gold weigh-in from the previous season is crazy, as he went from having 15 million in debt to mining more gold than he had ever seen in his life. Let's get started. Parker Schnabel had just had one of his best seasons ever when he made the bold decision to purchase Dominion Creek. Over 8,000 ounces of gold were brought in by Parker's workers in the season before to the purchase. That haul was valued at about $14 million at the time. It was a significant victory that once again demonstrated why Parker is among Gold Rush's top miners. His team was locked in during the previous season. The wash plants were operating virtually continuously. The guys knew what they were doing, and the ground was rich. All went smoothly. Big Red and Slucifer, their two operational wash facilities, were both producing gold on a weekly basis. Parker, however, wasted neither money nor time. His strategy was effective and streamlined, and it paid off handsomely. Even while the season was fantastic, Parker understood that it couldn't go on forever. Music, 5789.95. It seems like the more gold that emerges, the more I think, oh, this is the ground. Furthermore, it's not only that we get off to a great start, is it? It's really lovely. At first, it was just a sense of relief, but now I'm genuinely beginning to become enthusiastic. He had been mining at Scribner Creek for years, but the ground, there was beginning to run out. He realized that he needed to start thinking long-term because the easy gold was essentially gone. He needed fresh ground in order to continue developing, or merely to remain at the same level in the game. He needed something substantial, something that had been validated, and something that still had millions of dollars buried beneath it, not just any ground. Dominion Creek entered the picture at that point. It wasn't inexpensive, though. A whopping $15 million was the asking price. However, it might position him for years to come if it paid well. The pressure was on since it was thought that the region still had placer gold reserves worth more than $160 million, especially after such a successful season. Would Parker be able to mine even more gold and maintain the momentum? Or will this new claim turn out to be a $15 million error? Parker's decision to purchase Dominion Creek wasn't a simple one. It was the riskiest move he had ever made. Even though miners have extracted millions of dollars from this precise land in the past, $15 million was no little sum. This claim could keep Parker in the game for years if he could find the gold that was still hidden there and mine it properly. He didn't think he was buying dirt. He was purchasing protection, a long-term investment with gold deposits that have been shown to be reliable in the past, making the risk worthwhile. But there was no assurance that he would extract a significant amount of gold. There's always a chance that the gold is either gone or too difficult or costly to extract, even with a good map and prior success. That is Gold Run, a very wealthy watercourse. And I'm assuming that this is the location where it poured into Dominion. After the transaction was completed, reality set in. He needed to make it work now. There was no going back. New highways, new wash plant locations, new land, and new personnel arrangements. It was essentially a fresh start. Dominion Creek wasn't being kind from the beginning. Although the site had a rich past, it was also plagued by several issues. Parker had hoped for a smooth start by spending $15 million. However, he ended up with dirt, breakdowns, and constant headaches instead. The arrangement was the first thing. Scribner Creek was not this place. Dominion was more expansive, but it was also more intricate. There were huge distances to transport, pay soil, wash plant sites to clear, and new roads to construct. Each and every task required additional people, fuel, and time. Then there were issues with the equipment. Parker, unyielding as ever, once demanded that they raise Roxanne's feed rate by 20% as slewing continued. Knowing better than to argue, Alex concurred since more dirt eventually translated into more gold, which in turn meant more money for everyone. They continued in the hopes that the bet would be profitable. However, then an unforeseen event occurred. Furthermore, there were further breakdowns. A damaged conveyor belt occurred 1 week, followed by a jammed feeder or a failing pump. Hours were lost with each malfunction. Furthermore, time is literally money in the gold mining industry. The pressure was also being felt by the crew. Since this was unfamiliar territory, there would be more stress, more effort, and longer hours. Furthermore, a few of the crew members were brand new. Even though Parker had previously worked with others, they were all attempting to make things function in an environment where nothing seemed to go according to plan. I thought it was fairly good, but now it's like 20% over capacity and pouring all over the place. You simply need to exercise patience. You must put forth the necessary effort. Additionally, I don't think Parker has a lot of patience. Parker, who was generally composed under pressure, had 15 million reasons to be anxious while everyone else was focused on the task at hand. If this high-risk venture didn't work out, he would owe $15 million. Furthermore, the gold wasn't appearing quickly enough, which made matters worse. Even in the appropriate location, gold isn't always easy to find, despite Dominion Creek's good reputation. The initial weeks were incredibly slow. A lot of gasoline and effort was squandered on dirt that hardly paid because certain test cuts were unsuccessful. Many of those misses were beyond their means. Then there was the climate. Everything was more difficult in Dominion Creek because of the higher elevation and intense rains. Haul trucks became bogged, roads turned to mush, and mud slowed down everything and accelerated the deterioration of the machinery. Parker needed to quickly turn things around because everything was on the line. Millions were spent, the crew was overworked, and there wasn't much gold in the box. Parker finally got a respite after weeks of stress, breakdowns, and almost any gold. It began with a fresh cut. Deeper down, one area of ground appeared promising, but nobody was positive. Just getting there had required a significant amount of time and gasoline. However, everything changed after they passed that material through the plant. Gold began to pour out as the cell box glowed. Genuine gold. Parker and the crew witnessed solid color for the first time this season. They had been hoping for this type of pay dirt since the beginning. They dialed in the plant, changed the configuration, and continued to run the same layer. The gold continued to flow. It wasn't pure chance. The team's tireless efforts have finally paid off. Parker even broke into a rare smile. He was aware that the season might be saved if they had finally found their groove. That's almost $120,000 a day. There, we found 3 pans of gold, 700 ounces every week. T3, 85 ounces. In 1 week, more than 700 ounces. That's insane. Chris, Dumit once proposed that they weigh some gold at Parker's Dominion Creek residence. Chris's crew plant, Sluifer, had been operating on Australia Creek for a month at an average of 145.0 per week by this point. They measured the gold and obtained almost 270.050, which is more than $540,000. They didn't have an awful week. Parker's gold was next in line. Big Red was Parker's primary source of income prior to Roxanne's replacement, averaging more than 370 ounces per week. Even though there was delay while fixing Roxanne, Parker's crew was still able to obtain 453.80. That was over $120,000 in a single day. The crew discovered that they had managed 723.850 throughout that week when the final figures were totaled. At over $1.4 million, it was the season's largest haul. Everyone was content. The pressure was far from relieved, though, even as the gold started to come in. They had already lost a significant amount of time and were well into the season. At last, Dominion was making the payment. Was it insufficient, though? It's too late. In order to break even, let alone surpass last year's total, Parker needed a huge haul. As a result, the team continued to work non-stop, exerting great pressure on the wash plant and searching for every scrap of gold. They needed to give it their all if they wanted to call this season a success, even though they were winning now. At last, the gold was discovered. It was now merely a race against the clock. The staff has put in a lot of effort, week after week. They persevered despite malfunctions, inclement weather, and low morale. Additionally, the season had already taken a toll, even though they had finally found success. Now, every ounce matters. After the gold was ultimately spilt and weighed, 5,066 ounces was the total. It was a few thousand fewer than the run from the previous season. It appeared to be a step back on paper. Less money, less gold. Here's the twist though. Each and every ounce came from fresh ground. It was a victory because of that. Additionally, Parker exceeded his initial season target ahead of schedule because of Big Red's huge final haul.